Hello people of the internet, my name is Sir Lord, and today we are going over a deck tech actually. This is going to be for Magic the Gathering, and we're going to be talking about a commander deck that I have built. A little bit of a preface. This was going to be a heavily scripted video, but I wasn't liking how the script was turning out. And I don't really want to go too much into what the individual cards do for the deck tech. I kind of want to go more into how to play the deck and the engines that are built around it. So I think that a more free-form commentary video might work a bit better for that form of deck tech. Now, what deck are we looking at? Well, as you can see, we're going to be using a Rogra, son of Roga, and Yoshimaru Ever Faithful deck. So, Boros. Why Boros? All I want to do is swing? Is that what it is? No, I wanted to build one of the sneakiest decks in all of Magic the Gathering. Why? Why this color combination? Why wouldn't I do something like Dimir? They always do sneaky things. Well, if you know someone's going to be sneaky, you're going to be a lot more watchful or vigilant of them. So if I was playing blue-black sneakiness, you would know, hey, that person's playing blue-black sneakiness. I should probably keep an eye on them. And so they're going to be watching for your mana. They're going to be looking to see what you're doing, reading all of your cards. With a Boros deck with two cheap commanders that generally want to swing, they have a pretty good idea of what your strategy is going to be. But what they don't know is this is not the kind of deck you are. We are secretly a combo deck, and not a normal combo deck. This is a deck that has a hidden win condition. So we're gonna win via an unseen condition. It will be on the board. They will be able to see it, but they won't know how it's gonna work. So let me go into it a little bit. I'm gonna go into the win condition a little bit later, and we'll go into the other stuff. Or the win condition later, and we'll talk about the deck, the engines, and everything else first. Let's start with why we picked these commanders. One, is to give us the face of, hey, we're going to be aggressive. So that's one reason. Second reason is, with these commanders specifically, they are cheap and efficient, and we can build our engine around them. So we can play cards that we might not normally in order to facilitate building up of a board state and a mana structure. So we're actually going to start with the blink category. So this deck is going to take advantage of blinking creatures. Why? We're kind of using blink as a way to generate advantage. We're in Boros. We don't have very many options, so we have to find what we can in order to generate advantage. And these are going to be the creatures that we use to blink and pay off. So we have a couple weird additions here. First off, Emancipation Angel is not one you would see typically in this slot. You would probably just see another thing like Restoration Angel, for instance. Why are we playing Emancipation Angel? Partially because it's a protection spell that we can use to save our pieces for later. It lets us reset something to our hand, so it's a lot harder to interact with for the opponents. Plus, we can get some interesting triggers with a couple of our other permanent cards. It hits any permanent rather than creatures, which is much more valuable to us than just creatures. That's why this card's in the deck. Felidar Guardian's probably the best blink card we have because it hits whatever we need it to. Not much to be said there. Panharmonicon, very good if you're blinking anything. Extra triggers of your abilities can go a long way to creating extreme amounts of value. Mage's Attendant. This is also going to be a weird and new one. So we don't really get a lot of interaction with spells on the stack, but with Mage's Attendant, if we blink it significantly, or a significant number of times, we can actually create situations where your opponent has to play around how many wizards you have. And if you can keep looping it, i.e. with Felidar Guardian, Charming Prince, Panharmonicon, you can start making a ton of these wizards, allowing you to effectively control any non-creature deck. This card goes a long way. It gives you a lot of game versus decks that are not very creature-oriented, and we love that. Imperial Recruiter helps you find any of the pieces that you need from your Blink combo, aka the Ardent Elementalist, Felidar Guardian, Charming Prince. Unfortunately, a lot of these ones are 3, but you can still find a lot of good from the Imperial Recruiter. Flicker Wisp, versatile, can blink opponent stuff, lots of goodness there. Elementalist allows us to recur anything that we need. Now let's talk about card advantage. How are we going to keep the deck moving? How are we going to be finding new cards in order to keep casting them? Well, we have quite a few different options. One thing you'll note about this deck is I have more than 100 cards in it. Part of that is so you can pick and choose what you want to include, what to embellish, what to go deeper on, so you can customize the deck a bit to your own liking. So you could probably even cut out the Blink package if you wanted to, but if you're curious as why there's more than 100 cards, that would be why. But for our card advantage sweep, we have a lot of discard outlets to get us new, different cards. We are a combo deck, so we want to be searching deep, so we want to go as far as we can. For these ones, I do have discard payoffs that you will see a bit in the future, but we've already seen some of our resurrection, or not resurrection, our recursion with our Elementalist previously. But these are all cards that are going to try and generate us small bits of advantage throughout the game. Quite a few of them are mana hungry, like Mentor of the Meek, but when you're in black, red, white, you have very limited options. So we got both of these to trigger off our cheap creatures. They're also searchable by the Imperial Recruiter, so we can try and get our engine online. Esper Sentinel, good card, just draws you a bunch of cards, and if you can pump it up, you can start taxing people's mana pretty effectively, which pairs extremely well with the wizards I was talking about, with the Mage's Attendant earlier. Thrill, Faithless Looting, Cathartic Reunion, and Duretti. All of these are just for the discard draw outlet. Oh, same with Nahiri, but Nahiri serves the dual purpose of also finding or acting as removal. Duretti, you're not going to use his alternate modes all that much. He's primarily here for the draw or discard 2, draw 2. We need what we can get, and he's a planeswalker, which is pretty nice. Our artifact synergy isn't that great though. We have them, but it's nothing to write home about. Although getting Esper Sentinel back over and over again, not a bad idea. Or our Paradox Engine, or not Paradox Engine, Panharmonicon. Outpost Siege, just reliable draw throughout the game. Reconstruct History can get us literally whatever we need after it's been gone, except for creatures, which is unfortunate. But anything else we can get back with the Reconstruct History. Wheel of Misfortune is the only major draw card that we have in here. Honestly, if you have Wheel of Fortune, you could probably get away with playing that, and you might want to just play both, just so you can get even deeper and deeper into the deck. Now, do keep in mind, one of our alternative win conditions is a non-bow with Wheel of Misfortune. So do keep that in mind, because you can just as easily help others as you can just help yourself. Pretty self-explanatory here. We're going to skip land for now, and let's talk about ramp. So this is actually going to be one of the more unique parts of this build. So we have a couple options you probably always see. Soul Ring, Mana Crypt, Thought Vessel, everywhere. Everywhere. We got 2 mana rocks. These can be any 2 mana rocks. These are just the ones that I put in. You could probably put in Felwar Stones and stuff like that, and it'd be a lot easier. I didn't pick Felwar Stone because these aren't very common colors to run into at every table. If we were like a blue, black, or green deck, easily Felwar Stone. You get your colors automatically. But a lot of these are going to be the white staples for ramp and a Ragavan. Price point for this deck is just cards I had. So yes, I built it on tapped out, but I own majority of these cards. So I was just going with cards that I looked around and found. You can easily substitute a lot of these, though. Ragavan can just be more of a mana rock. He is card advantage, so it is a little bit tough. He's a very good card. Who would have thought? But you can mix and match with whatever you need and tailor it to your play group. But Sword of the Animist is going to be a card that pairs well with our commanders. This is one of the reasons that we have such cheap commanders, is because we can equip them with the Sword of the Animist and start getting an additional land every turn. This can snowball the game extremely hard and keep us ahead. Now, there is a non-bow with Sword of the Animist and Archaeomancer's Map and Keeper of the Accord. These two fill a similar role, and this one gets you ahead. I think it's fine to run multiple of these effects. Yes, it feels bad if you have all of them out, but you're going to want like any form of ramp you can get, so having multiple outs to ramp just feels very good. Some unknown technology, though, would be Planar Birth. So a lot of you probably haven't seen this card. It's an old card that lets you put all basic lands from all graveyards into play under their owner's control, tapped. So a lot of our discard outlets that we were playing earlier are specifically meant to be used with this card. You can generate, this is essentially if you play it right, one-sided or super one-sided Splendid Reclamation. You can get so many lands into play. With a lot of people running non-basic lands, you can get insane amounts of value out of this. You can do this for 2 and you can get 4 lands out of the yard. If you've been doing it, going in hard, discarding a bunch of basics, you could probably even get up to like 8 or 9. That's not unheard of. This card, very good, underrated, unknown. I recommend you guys try it out for yourself. I wouldn't put it in every single deck. You need to be able to take advantage of this, but any white, red X deck definitely should take a look at the Planar Birth. -5 color decks, because you have to run a lot of non-basics. But now that we've talked a tiny bit about the ramp package, let's look at the lands themselves. So we have a lot of different selection. You can mix and match as you see fit. Some of these lands will do better in certain scenarios, some of them will do worse in other configurations. It just depends on what you want to build. So for instance, I have a bunch of the fetch lands in here, including Evolving Wilds, Marsh Flats, Terramorphic, Myriad Landscape. You do not need to add the fetch lands or the landscapes. I have a second hidden ramp engine in this deck, and they synergize very well with the tap lands, as well as a lot of these sacrifice lands to do an effect. That's why we're playing things like Cryptic Caves, Strip Mine, Urza Saga, kind of. There's a little bit more complex than that, Sunbait Canyon, because we actually have ways in white to recur these permanents that we're getting rid of. So that's why we also have Field of Ruin, Blast Zone, all this stuff. We can get pretty sneaky with our lands with certain cards. Now, it is expensive in the mana department to do that. That's why we went pretty hard in our ramp package. But the payoff you can get for pulling off some of these plays is huge. Other than that, just standard fixing, mix and match your red-white lands. We're pretty heavy white in this deck, so you don't need as many red sources. That's why I'm playing 12 plains and only 7 mountains. Also, if you notice, it's a very high land count deck. We're going to be trying to hit as many land drops as we possibly can. In addition to that, we need a lot of basics for all of our ramp pieces. Our land tax, our Myriad Landscape also requires basics. Like, a lot of our search options require basics. So we play an extremely high amount of basics to help compensate for that, because we always want to be getting these lands into play. our next category is going to be the removal category. How do we deal with our opponent's stuff? So, my philosophy in Commander is have some stuff, but mostly let your opponents use the removal. Why? One, if you're putting it on your opponents to do the removal, they're not advancing their boardscape. You might think it's scummy because you're like forcing them to use their resources, but it's a multiplayer game. You gotta use whatever you can. That's not to say you can't have any removal, because sometimes you gotta remove stuff. So we play very light amount of removal in our deck. We have very few ways to get rid of a bunch of different permanents, but we do have them. My removal suite of choice is going to be something similar to this. I want cheap and efficient, but I also want utility in addition to that. So for instance, I got our 2 Boros Overload spells here. This is mostly because I do not like having to remove my own stuff on my turn and my opponents being able to rebuild first. So I like them to be one-sided or instant speed. Considering how expensive this deck is mana-wise, in order to get operating, I chose for the cheaper options that don't hit my own stuff. Citizen's Crowbar, this might seem like a weird addition, but there's going to be some secret tech you'll see here in a bit. We're kind of starting to build up to our win condition, so just keep this card in mind. Lightning Bolt, sometimes you can kill someone who's doing some crazy shenanigans or lets himself get low with this. Also very good for just getting rid of commanders. Solitude, though. Solitude is extremely good in this deck if you run the Blink package, because you can start just exiling people's stuff if you blink Solitude. So you let it come in, exile their thing, blink it, exile the next thing, etc., etc. You can get a lot of value and removal out of this one, and it kind of lets you run light on removal, because any of your blink effects can turn into Swords to Plowshare. In addition to Panharmonicon being a double Swords to Plowshare, so good. So good, in fact, we actually just run Swords to Plowshare. And then we got Wandering Emperor. I kind of put this in just to go with Yoshimaru. Like, I just think it's cute. But you can easily cut this one. It is very good and tough for a lot of people to play around, because you can easily get your value out of this card. It's also not very seen, so you can get mileage. Alright, for our utility. So this is just going to be random stuff that may or may not help us. This is where we get interesting with the lands. In addition to our ramp package, we have a secret second ramp package. So that's going to be our Cosmic Interventions, Faith Reward, and these 2 cards. They are going to be able to return our permanents that we get rid of for value and put them back onto the battlefield. So that's going to be our Ghost Quarters, our fetch lands. All of those are permanents, and you can get them back from the Faith Reward and Cosmic Intervention. It's also really nice to help against the board wipes, to keep our battlefield going and keep us ahead of our opponents. Now, do keep in mind, these 2 work differently from each other. So Cosmic Intervention has to be played before the board wipe or the sacking happens. Okay? Faith Reward has to be after. Keep this in mind, okay? So you'll think that they do the same thing. They don't, because this one gets them back at the beginning and the end step. This one does it immediately. So you do need to keep in mind which one you have and plan accordingly, or set it up accordingly, just to make sure you get the right amount of value. Okay? Keep that in mind. Cosmic Intervention before, Faith's Reward afterwards. Okay? Enlightened Tutor, very good card. Helps us with a lot of things. Smooths out our deck entirely. Every white deck should probably run it, even if you're just grabbing things like Soul Ring or any of your value enchantments. These two might seem a little bit weird, and we'll go over them a bit later. Just keep in mind that we can use them to pump up our guys, and if we need to, we can use them to attempt to do a commander damage win. It's not very consistent, but there is a purpose for them beyond what you see right here, which we'll go into a bit later. Grand Abolisher, this helps us keep our combo alive, and it helps against like people who do kind of, oh, that's what you're doing, well, I'm gonna do this, when they find out about your win condition. Because you will get those times where you're like, hey, this is on the stack, and they're like, yeah, it happens, you get the win, and then they're like, well, I didn't know that's what it would do, so I'm gonna get rid of it. This gets rid of those scenarios. You don't have to run this card, I just like having it. It's a failsafe. Recursion for creatures, we didn't really have a bunch of that, so this is how we're getting our creatures back. Also very great blink target. Open the Armory, gets our utility options for equipments. Sword of the Animist, if we need to ramp. We can get the Crowbar if we need to remove stuff. It's just good. Keeps our stuff alive. Not much more to be said about Rebuff the Wicked. Only works on permanents you control though. Cannot save you. Only saves you from single target removal. Use it to keep your key permanent alive and go from there. Selfless Spirit keeps our board alive. Helps against board wipes. Teferi's Protection, same boat. Soul Warden will gain you a crap ton of life. You don't need to run a bunch of things to work off Soul Warden. You just need to play Soul Warden and watch the Goblins player cry. Trust me, this card does more work than people give it credit for. Do not play the ones that only work on your creatures. You can play any of the ones that work on any creature, not the ones for just your creatures. And Vidalcan Orrery lets you play at instant speed for the entirety of the game. Excuse me. Very good for, honestly, everything. Just changing how you can play the game and interact with everything. Very, very useful, especially with Emancipation Angel, Historic Recollection, or any of those cards. Very, very handy. And our last tab is going to be our win condition. So we've actually seen the win condition, okay? Or we've had the setup for the win condition. And if you want to take a guess at what our win condition is, now is the time. I will say it does include Batterbone and Flare Husk, and it does not include dealing damage, okay? So that's your hints. You got 3 seconds before you are going to be shown why this deck is the sneakiest deck in all of Magic. And that is, we're a Happily Ever After deck. What? Happily Ever After, you may say? How do we trigger Happily Ever After? We're in red and blue, or red and white. Well, you've already seen all the ways we can do it. We have black in the germ tokens from Batterbone and Flare Husk, okay? The Mage's Attendant from earlier is blue, so we got green, or we got blue and black, red, white, easy. And then for our green, we actually have the Citizen's Crowbar, which makes a green and white citizen creature token, and you attach it to it. So you can generate all 3 colors that we don't have in this deck without breaking the constraints of Commander. People will not see this coming at all, because you'll play Happily Ever After, everyone gains 5 life, draws a card, and they'll be like, okay, sure. You'll blink it a couple times, and people are like, oh, it's how they generate card advantage. Gives it to everyone, kind of gets people off your back. Sneaky politics card, this one. But when you have your win condition all out there, and you're just chilling, not doing much, and your opponents are like, pass, 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 and then it's your turn, and you have the upkeep trigger, oh man, will people be like, wait, what? You win? But where's your colors? And then you show them the tokens, and you're like, dang. We have a secret failsafe in Mascot Exhibition as well. It doesn't get us green, but it gets us the other 2 colors. And we have more ways to make the green ones than you would think with Rabble Rousing. Happily Ever After is also why we're playing 3 Planeswalkers. I don't want to make it any lower than that. You could also play some tribal spells to increase the amount of card types. Crib Swap would be the one I would think of, just so you can get a exile effect or a removal spell in there. That's the one I would put in if I was going to put in any of them. Rabble Rousing, this can actually make you into a swing deck, so you can generate a bunch of people. I wouldn't worry too much about the hideaway, you just want to make as many guys as possible. Mascot Exhibition. If your playgroup plays with lessons and learn boards or sideboards, put this in the sideboard and put in a lesson board just so you can run any other card that isn't this one. Probably the 4 damage to any creature and learn lesson, or you can put a Professor of Symbology in here just so you can use it to tutor multiple, if you blink it, multiple lessons. Kind of gives you a toolbox. They are not legal by default in Commander, unfortunately, but just in case, you have this as an option, or you can put this in the main board. Grenzo, also sneaky way for you to obtain your opponent's cards and possibly use them to trigger your conditions. It's also just card advantage. You can get a lot of value out of this, or if someone gets very scary with giant tall creatures, you can use this to kind of get around that. It's kind of tough to block Rograk when he has a menace. And you can also make Yoshimaru kind of big since we're playing a decent chunk of legendary creatures. Our last possible win condition is going to be the Drannith Magistrate and Urabrask Heretic Predator combo. Or Predator, my bad. So how this works is you essentially lock your opponent out of playing the game with these two on the field. They can no longer, without intervention, draw cards naturally on their turn and use them. Urabrask makes it so they exile cards for their draw phase instead of drawing them. That is brutal. With Drannith Magistrate, your opponent can't cast spells from anywhere other than their hands. You lock them out of their commander, you lock them out of the top deck. So you just have to worry about what's in their hand. That's why earlier when we were talking about Wheel of Misfortune and Wheel of Fortune, you do need to be careful if you assemble this combo with those two cards, because you might not want to break the lock, because they could find things like Divination or any other ways to draw multiple cards. That is how they can get out of the lock. So just be aware, take out any threats that you need to. This is mostly for repeat games after people have figured out Happily Ever After. Sneak attacks don't usually work twice, but man oh man, the first Happily Ever After, beautiful. Your opponents will be speechless. Well, that's all I got. Let me know in the comments what you would add, what you would take out, whether or not you would change the engines that I have in here, whether or not you want to make any other additions, how you make it better, how you might make it a bit more silly. Like, this deck can go in a lot of places. It's very open to interpretation, or open to editing, making it your own. I kind of just wanted to make this so people would get a little bit more creative in Commander and try for harder win conditions. I don't mean like 20 card combos. This kind of is like a bunch of card combos, but more go out there and try and find weird win conditions. I'm kind of sick of seeing all the same decks that's just value, or infinite combo. Yes, this is a value deck, but it definitely doesn't win in the traditional way, and is very sneaky for the red-white combination. Hopefully I also showed you some cool, interesting tech to maybe put in your own decks. Let's have a discussion about it. Do you guys want to see more deck techs? I can make a bunch of these crazy